Argentina was an early adopter of the Mauser system. The Model 1891 in particular is really a beautiful rifle made in another age.
Throughout the 19th century, Argentina was involved in a number of wars and conflicts. They fought the British, they fought the Spanish, the Bolivians, the Brazilians, Paraguay, Uruguay, some internal conflicts. They fought the Patagonian Indians, and by 1870 their army had become truly a professional army. In 1891, they adopted a new form of Mauser. This, of course, became known as the Model 1891 Argentinian Mauser.
The Argentine Mauser was ultimately produced by two German firms, Lowe's and then also the DWM. DWM standing for Deutsche Waffen- und Munitionsfabriken. They made the Model 1891 as a very lovely, a very attractive 48.6 inch long rifle with a 29.1 inch long barrel. The rifle weighed in just over 8.5 pounds, and it fired the Argentine specific 7.65 by 53 millimeter cartridge from that 29.1 inch barrel at a muzzle velocity of 2,755 feet per second.
Now the 1891 Argentine, when it was produced, was made in three different styles. There was the long infantry rifle, there was a short cavalry carbine in which the wood on the stock went all the way up to the muzzle and had a muzzle crowning and forend, much the same as was found on the Model 1888 commission carbine. The interesting thing was that the engineer carbine that came out at the same time was much the same as the cavalry carbine, except that they had installed a two-piece bayonet lug. And this was to accommodate the leftover bayonets from the Remington rolling block rifles, of which Argentina had quite a few of them.
They were spectacularly attractive firearms with deep blued finish, with beautiful wood. They had the very characteristic magazine assembly that projected below the bottom of the rifle. And they're in every respect a very handsome firearm. But Argentina is ultimately not satisfied with simply purchasing them from another country and then importing them into the Republic. And so in a pattern that Argentina would repeat with several famous gun designs during the coming century of acquisition, they ultimately receive a license to produce a modified version of this rifle in the form of the 1909 Mauser. The Argentine Mauser was ultimately produced by two German firms, Lowe's and then also the DWM. But Argentina is ultimately not satisfied with simply purchasing them from another country and then importing them into the Republic. And so they ultimately receive a license to produce a modified version of this rifle in the form of the 1909 Mauser. Now the 1909 Mauser differs in a few significant ways. It still has an internal 5-round spring-fed magazine, except with the big difference being that on the 1909 Argentine Mauser, it is a staggered row internal box magazine. They still fire the 7.62 by 53 millimeter cartridge. They're still attractive firearms, but they are made domestically.
The guns themselves were beautifully made. When you find an Argentine Mauser that hasn't been messed with, it is a gun from another era. It is beautifully machined, beautifully polished, beautifully blued, and they tended to have very, very nice walnut stocks. Unlike most Mausers that you encounter, the 91s were cock on close. That means that primary cocking occurs as you're closing the bolt. Most Mausers, Model 98 base Mausers, including the Argentine Model 1909, are cock on opening.
Since Argentina had stayed neutral during World War I and again through most of World War II, only declaring war on Germany at the very end, these weapons were virtually unused. In the late 1950s, Inner Arms Company cut a deal with the Argentine government and imported thousands and thousands of these rifles into the U.S. Many of them were then sporterized.
Unfortunately, there was a law in place at that time that required any military material that was put up for disposal by the Argentine military had to have the national crest removed. And so all of those rifles have crests that have been ground off. Well, after that and all of the adverse comment that drew, Mr. Cummings went back to Argentina and got the law changed.
The Argentine Mauser really represents the best of the export Mausers, the early export Mausers. Unlike some nations, the Argentinians took very good care of these rifles. And they are some of the earliest bolt-action rifles you'll encounter. I mean, the only bolt-action rifles, modern bolt-action rifles from Mauser, you have the 89 Belgian Mauser, which they didn't start making them until 91, and you have the 1890 Turkish guns. So this is a gun that was on the cutting edge of military rifle design before the turn of the 20th century.